that heated walkway right now, or I'm calling the cops!
HOA President Veronica Sterling screamed in my face during a deadly blizzard dumping 3 feet of snow hourly. My disabled wife Rosalind was trapped inside, oxygen delivery canceled, our walkway a sheet of ice. 3 p.m., storm hits. 3:15 p.m. This entitled Karen pounds on my door in bone-chilling sub-zero winds, demanding I shut off the heating system.
Your wife's disability doesn't override community rules!
She snarled, face red with rage as Arctic wind whipped around us. Ice stinging like frozen needles. Through the window, Rosalind watched helplessly, oxygen tank beeping warnings. This Karen had no idea who she was messing with. I'm Garrett Finch, retired municipal water engineer, 35 years experience, and something about her perfect little neighborhood had always bothered me. Drop your worst HOA Karen story below, because what I discovered next ended her reign forever. 3 years ago, Veronica Sterling showed up at our door with a clipboard and the kind of fake smile that screams, "I'm about to ruin your life." Welcome to Willowbrook Estates, where apparently breathing without permission violates community standards. Just reviewing your moving compliance, she'd announced, eyeing our truck like we were smuggling meth instead of medical equipment. We'd moved here for Rosalind's lungs. After 34 years of marriage and her worsening COPD, doctors said clean air and single-story living weren't suggestions. They were survival requirements. Willowbrook seemed perfect. Upscale planned community, tree-lined streets, the kind of quiet that helps you actually breathe. That first winter almost killed her. December ice storm. Rosalind slipped on our front walkway, couldn't get up, lay there gasping in sub-zero air for 20 minutes until Mrs. Patterson found her. Hospital said another 10 minutes and game over. So I engineered a solution, $8,000 heated walkway system, radiant cables, thermostat controlled, energy efficient as hell. County permits? Check. Fire department approval? Check. Electrical inspection? Passed with flying colors. 2 years of perfect operation. Rosalind could reach her oxygen deliveries safely, get the mail without risking death, actually step outside during winter. The concrete stayed warm enough to melt snow on contact. You could smell that clean, wet pavement scent, even in blizzards. Then Sterling decided to become HOA Führer. Veronica Sterling, 54, real estate agent, married to City Planning Committee member Baxter Sterling. Think middle-aged Karen with a law degree and the personality of a paper shredder. Their house looks like a wedding cake designed by someone who hates joy, all fake columns and gaudy stonework that screams new money, no taste. Her campaign slogan? Restoring property values through proper standards. Translation: I will destroy anyone who doesn't worship my aesthetic vision. Her first victim, 78-year-old Mr. Kowalski. This sweet old man had been feeding birds for decades, little finches that would chirp outside his kitchen window every morning. Sterling hit him with a $2,400 fine for non-conforming wildlife attractions depressing neighborhood aesthetics. I'm reading this in our community newsletter, coffee going cold in my hands, thinking, who finds a retiree for bird feeders? The kind of person who gets off on crushing people who can't fight back. But Sterling made one crucial mistake with old Kowalski. See, his son works for the county water department, and during one of their "How's your evil HOA" conversations, something interesting came up about Willowbrook's water usage patterns. Some houses were using significantly less water than others, like suspiciously less. Then Sterling came for our walkway. Unauthorized aesthetic modification requiring immediate removal, she announced during an emergency architectural review board meeting. The board? Sterling plus 2 wine mom friends who'd agree with her if she said gravity was optional. I have every permit imaginable, I told her, spreading documentation across the conference table like evidence at trial. County permits don't override our architectural standards. Her nails clicked against the table like tiny hammers. That sound still makes my teeth itch. What standards? There's nothing about walkway heating in our community charter. Her smile could freeze vodka. There is now. She'd amended bylaws 3 times in 6 months, always targeting specific residents. Mrs. Bianca, forced to remove wheelchair ramp. Patterson family, fined for visible therapy equipment. Each victim carefully selected, elderly, disabled, anyone who might struggle to fight back legally. But here's the thing about spending 35 years as a municipal water engineer, you develop instincts. Something about perfect little Willowbrook had always nagged at me. The infrastructure felt off. Water pressure was inconsistent between streets. Some areas had noticeably softer water, and now Kowalski's son was mentioning usage discrepancies that didn't make engineering sense. Sterling thought she was picking on a harmless old engineer whose wife needed medical accommodations. She had no idea she'd just declared war on someone who knew exactly how to investigate municipal water systems. The next morning, Sterling appeared at my door with her enforcement officer, a gangly kid in an oversized security jacket who looked like he'd rather be playing Xbox. "Mr. Finch, I'm Derek Sterling, HOA compliance coordinator." He flashed a badge that definitely came from a cereal box. "We're here to document your walkway violation." Ah, family business. Sterling had hired her own nephew to terrorize the neighborhood. The kid couldn't have been more than 22, all acne scars and nervous energy, shifting his weight like he needed permission to breathe. "There's no violation," I said, stepping onto my perfectly heated concrete. "Even in freezing weather, warmth radiated through your shoes like standing on a giant heating pad. Every permit's legit." Sterling pushed past Derek, her stilettos clicking aggressively on my walkway. The irony was delicious. She was literally standing on the system she wanted destroyed, enjoying its warmth while plotting its removal. Her overpowering perfume hit me like a chemical weapon, aggressive florals trying to mask stale cigarettes and something else. Desperation, maybe. "HOA regulations supersede county permits," she announced, whipping out her phone. "This creates unfair advantage and violates aesthetic uniformity standards." Derek started photographing everything like he was documenting a murder scene. Kid was thorough, snapping shots of heating cables, electrical connections, even trying to peer through our windows until I blocked his view with my considerable bulk. "Ma'am, this prevents my disabled wife from dying on ice. Medical needs don't override community standards." She practically purred with satisfaction, eyes gleaming like a predator spotting wounded prey. "Lien gets filed Friday if this isn't removed." 4 days. This woman was giving us 4 days to rip out our safety system. That afternoon found me in disability attorney Marlene Vasquez's office, surrounded by law books and the smell of expensive leather mixed with fresh coffee. Vasquez was sharp as a scalpel, the kind of lawyer bullies cross the street to avoid. "Classic selective enforcement pattern," she said, reviewing my documentation with the methodical precision of a surgeon. "They target vulnerable residents, hoping you'll cave rather than fight back. Years ago, I'd read about housing discrimination cases during my municipal engineering training. The Fair Housing Act doesn't just protect against obviously discriminatory rules, it protects against discriminatory enforcement. When HOAs consistently target elderly, disabled, or minority residents while ignoring identical violations by preferred neighbors, that's textbook disparate treatment. Doesn't matter if the rules themselves seem neutral, the pattern of who gets punished reveals the real motivation burning underneath. "What's our play?" I asked. "Document everything. But first, let's establish their systematic pattern." She pulled out fresh legal pads, expensive pens clicking ready. "Tell me about their other targets." I ran through Sterling's greatest hits: Kowalski's bird feeder fines, Mrs. Bianca's wheelchair ramp battle, the Pattersons getting hassled over their son's therapy equipment. Every victim carefully selected, old, sick, or struggling to fight back effectively. Vasquez's pen scratched furiously across paper as the pieces clicked together like gears in a well-oiled machine. Then she discovered something that made my engineering brain light up like Christmas morning. "Your HOA president's been exceptionally busy," she said, sliding documents across her polished mahogany desk. 3 bylaw amendments in 6 months. Look at these suspicious dates. The paperwork told a fascinating story of coordinated corruption. Each amendment targeted a specific resident situation, filed within days of their permit applications becoming available through city channels. Sterling wasn't randomly making up rules. She had advance intelligence from inside sources. "How's she getting permit information before it's public?" Vasquez's smile could cut tempered glass. "Husband Baxter sits on city planning committee. He gets advance access to every permit application in the entire district." The scope hit me like ice water down my spine. This wasn't just HOA harassment, it was an organized intelligence operation. Baxter would leak upcoming permits to Veronica, who'd create targeted rules to block them before residents knew they needed different approval. A beautiful little corruption machine running right under everyone's noses. But then Vasquez pulled the real bombshell: Sterling family property records. Guess who approved multiple modifications without any HOA review? She highlighted a damning list: decorative lighting, extended driveway, outdoor kitchen, hot tub installation, all on Sterling property, all conveniently signed off by Baxter Sterling himself. They exempted themselves from their own rules, while using those same rules to terrorize disabled neighbors. She leaned back in her leather chair. It's systematic discrimination with a beautiful paper trail. That evening, I sat reviewing evidence while Rosalind used her nebulizer, its gentle humming mixing with our walkway pump cycling outside. Two machines keeping my wife alive, both threatened by Sterling's power games. But Derek had made one beautiful mistake during his documentation visit. Kid forgot his phone was still recording when he started venting about family drama. "She's completely insane," his voice came through crystal clear on the evidence video. "Yesterday she measured my grass with a ruler because it looked too long. A freaking ruler, dude. Who measures grass with rulers?" Even Sterling's own nephew thought she'd lost her mind. The question was, what other secrets was this perfect little neighborhood hiding? Sterling called an emergency HOA meeting for Thursday night, exactly 24 hours before her lien deadline. The woman had timing like a shark sensing blood. "Emergency session regarding dangerous property modifications," read the hastily printed notice shoved under every door. 24-hour notice for a meeting requiring 72 hours advance warning. But Sterling was betting most residents didn't know their own bylaws from their shopping lists. Thursday evening, the community center reeked of desperation and burnt coffee. Sterling had packed the room with her usual suspects: real estate clients, wine club cronies, anyone who owed her favors or feared her wrath. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sterling announced, clicking across cracked linoleum in stilettos that could puncture steel, "we face a serious threat to our community standards." She'd prepared a full PowerPoint presentation about my walkway. The dedication was almost admirable. Slide 1. Unauthorized modifications destroy property values. Slide 2. Medical exceptions create legal liability. Slide 3. My perfectly maintained walkway labeled community eyesore. The irony was delicious. My concrete looked better than the community center's pothole-riddled entrance. But Sterling pressed on, voice rising like a televangelist hitting her stride. "This modification sets dangerous precedent. Today it's heated walkways, tomorrow heated driveways, then heated patios. Where does this madness end?" Mrs. Patterson's hand shot up from the back. "Veronica, didn't you install an unauthorized hot tub last year?" Sterling's face flushed red as a brake light. Completely different. Hot tubs are recreational amenities, not infrastructure modifications. Without architectural review, Patterson pressed, clearly enjoying herself. "The board determined it fell under existing guidelines." Sterling's voice cracked slightly. Translation: she'd rubber-stamped her own hot tub while denying everyone else's improvements. During the coffee break, I fired up my laptop and dove into municipal databases. Years of engineering work had taught me that infrastructure tells stories if you know how to listen. And something about Sterling's neighborhood was whispering secrets. Water consumption data revealed fascinating patterns. Average suburban household burns through 300 gallons daily. Irrigation, showers, dishwashers, laundry. But Sterling's entire street consistently used 40% less than comparable areas. Not just her house, the whole damn street. These weren't tree-hugging conservationists. I'd watched their sprinklers running during drought restrictions. Something else was feeding their water needs, and that something wasn't showing up on city meters. I started cross-referencing property surveys with historical agricultural records. Willowbrook sat on former farmland, and farms always had irrigation wells. Wells that should have been properly sealed when the land got developed for suburban paradise. But what if they weren't sealed? What if certain residents had discovered creative ways to supplement expensive city water with free agricultural well water? That would explain everything. The usage discrepancies, the suspiciously low bills, Sterling's panic whenever anyone mentioned infrastructure. Back inside, Sterling was building toward her grand finale. "I therefore propose immediate fines of $2,500 plus mandatory removal within 48 hours. "Seconded," squeaked her wine club lieutenant. Then Derek raised his hand from the corner, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. "Aunt Veronica, quick question." Sterling's smile could have refrigerated hell. Yes, Derek. Why is our family's water bill like half what everyone else pays? Mom thinks our meter's busted or something. The room went morgue quiet. You could hear individual fluorescent bulbs humming their death songs overhead. Sterling's face cycled through panic, rage, and forced calm in about 3 seconds. We practice responsible water conservation, Derek. Others should follow our example. But that innocent question detonated like a grenade in church. Neighbors started whispering, mental calculators spinning. Mrs. Bianca pulled out her phone, probably checking her last water bill. Kowalski was nodding slowly, puzzle pieces clicking together. Actually, I said, standing with my laptop full of damning data, Derek just raised something fascinating about community water usage patterns. Sterling looked like she'd swallowed a live grenade. Mr. Finch, utility bills aren't tonight's topic. No, but legal compliance is. I angled my screen toward the crowd. If we're discussing violations, perhaps we should examine all of them. Her face went white as bone. Sterling knew exactly what I was implying, and her terror was painting the story for everyone else. This meeting is adjourned, she shrieked, practically teleporting toward the exit. Too late. The questions had started, and neighborhood questions spread like wildfire in drought season. Derek intercepted me in the parking lot, genuine confusion written across his young face. Mr. Finch, what did you mean about water patterns? I jingled my keys in the crisp night air, breathing steam in the cold. Nothing concrete yet, Derek, but ask me again next week. The kid had no idea he'd just lit the fuse that would blow up his aunt's entire world. Friday morning brought Sterling's nuclear option. A private investigator parked outside our house in a black SUV about as subtle as a circus elephant performing ballet. The guy looked like discount James Bond. Polyester suit, gas station sunglasses, probably got his PI license from a cereal box promotion. He was photographing our mailbox like it contained nuclear launch codes, completely oblivious to how ridiculous he looked crouched behind his steering wheel. But Sterling's panic was showing in beautiful, desperate ways. She'd also hired some bottom-tier security company to patrol community safety concerns. Translation: intimidate anyone asking uncomfortable questions about mysteriously low water bills. By noon, 3 neighbors had called about security guards harassing them. Mrs. Bianca found one moron literally digging around her water meter, claiming he was checking for dangerous leaks. The guy had left muddy boot prints across her prize-winning flower beds and trampled her roses like Godzilla in suburbia. These rent-a-cops were doing Sterling's dirty work so clumsily they might as well have worn neon signs reading, "We're covering up major crimes here. Ask us how." Meanwhile, I was doing what engineers do best, following paper trails that expose beautiful, systematic lies. The 1987 County Geological Survey read like a treasure map to corruption. Willowbrook's former farmland had contained 3 active irrigation wells, all legally requiring proper decommissioning before residential development. The largest well sat directly under Sterling Street, perfectly positioned to serve 8 houses total. But here's where professional incompetence met criminal genius in perfect harmony. The decommissioning permits showed approved completion with official signatures, but the actual work orders revealed something absolutely delicious. The wells weren't properly filled and sealed according to environmental regulations. They were just disconnected from surface irrigation systems. Engineering translation: someone removed the visible equipment while leaving fully functional wells underground and accessible. Like hiding a loaded bomb by simply removing the timer while leaving everything else intact. During my lunch break, I took a casual stroll through Sterling's neighborhood, supposedly admiring our community's professional landscaping. What I discovered made my engineer's soul sing with righteous fury and professional indignation. Every single house on that street had identical decorative manhole covers positioned strategically in their backyards. Cute cast-iron circles that typical suburbanites would assume were septic access points or standard utility connections. But they sat directly over the mapped old well locations, and they weren't decorative. They were completely operational access points. Someone had engineered an entire underground distribution system with individual connections delivering free agricultural water to 8 families while they paid city bills for maybe half their actual consumption. The technical execution was actually impressive, in a completely felonious way that would make any municipal engineer simultaneously proud and horrified. But agricultural wells from the 80s carry a special kind of poison legacy that makes engineers lose sleep. I called my old environmental agency contact, Jim Morrison, who specialized in agricultural contamination nightmares across 3 states. "Garrett, please tell me you're not calling about people drinking water from decommissioned farm wells." "Why, what's fundamentally wrong with that?" Jim's groan sounded like a dying walrus choking on regret. "Those wells are basically toxic soup kitchens. Pesticide runoff, nitrate contamination, bacterial colonies growing happily in stagnant systems. We've been cleaning up environmental disasters like that for decades." My blood turned ice cold as implications crashed over me. How genuinely toxic are we talking? Short-term exposure causes stomach problems and respiratory issues. Long-term exposure? Developmental disorders in children, immune system collapse in elderly adults, potential carcinogenic effects. The nitrate concentrations alone can kill infants outright. I was thinking about Mrs. Patterson's baby grandchild who visited weekly, Mr. Kowalski's mysterious ongoing stomach problems, the Sterling neighbor's kid with unexplained learning disabilities that doctors couldn't diagnose. If someone discovered illegal well usage and deliberately didn't report it, federal environmental crime investigation, EPA raids with hazmat teams, criminal conspiracy charges for anyone who knew about contamination. We're talking federal prison sentences, not county jail vacation time. That evening, Sterling made her final desperate gamble. She appeared at our door clutching what looked like a peace treaty written in pure, concentrated panic. "Mr. Finch, I've completely reconsidered your Walkway situation." She was holding an actual check, a very big one with lots of zeros. $30,000 for removal costs and premium safety alternatives. Professional installation, luxury materials, whatever special accommodations your wife requires. 30 grand for an $8,000 system that was completely legal and properly permitted. My eyebrows must have hit my hairline. That's incredibly generous. All I need is your discrimination complaint withdrawn and your agreement to stop encouraging neighbors to question utility systems or community infrastructure. There it was, dripping with desperation and fear. She knew exactly what I'd discovered, and she was offering serious money to bury it forever. The check went straight into my evidence folder. Sunday morning, I drove to the state environmental testing lab with 8 water samples and a stomach churning like a washing machine full of dread. Dr. Sarah Kim, the lab director, was an old colleague from my municipal days. Brilliant chemist who'd moved into environmental contamination analysis after too many nights losing sleep over poisoned communities. Her lab smelled like bleach and broken promises, all sterile surfaces and equipment that hummed ominous warnings. "Garrett, these samples are supposed to be residential tap water?" She was staring at her computer screen like it was displaying apocalypse data. "Standard city water supply, according to the residents." "Well, they've been lied to for years." She pulled up test results that made my blood pressure spike. These readings scream untreated agricultural well water, ancient, contaminated agricultural well water that should never touch human lips. My engineering instincts had suspected it, but seeing scientific proof felt like getting punched by a concrete mixer. "Give me the damage assessment." Sarah's face went mortician serious. "Nitrate levels 300% above safe consumption limits. Pesticide residue from chemicals banned before Clinton was president. Bacterial contamination suggesting stagnant distribution systems with zero treatment protocols." She scrolled through additional horrors, each number painting a portrait of systematic neighborhood poisoning. "Garrett, this water violates every federal safety standard. Pregnant women, infants, elderly adults with compromised immune systems. This stuff is basically slow-acting poison for vulnerable populations. Like Rosalind with her struggling lungs. Like Mrs. Patterson's baby grandchild who visited twice weekly. Like half the residents Sterling had been targeting for HOA harassment while literally poisoning them. "There's worse news," Sarah continued, pulling up heavy metal analysis. "Corroded distribution pipes leaching lead and copper. Agricultural runoff containing organophosphates linked to permanent neurological damage. This isn't just contaminated water, it's a public health catastrophe disguised as suburban paradise." The horrifying scope crashed over me like toxic surf. How long before health effects become obvious? Depends on individual vulnerability, but acute symptoms appear within months. Chronic damage accumulates over years. Children and elderly show effects first. Developmental delays, immune system collapse, gastrointestinal disasters. Suddenly everything clicked with sickening clarity. Mr. Kowalski's mysterious stomach problems that doctors couldn't diagnose. the Sterling neighbor's kid struggling with unexplained learning disabilities. Mrs. Patterson mentioning her grandchild's frequent infections during weekend visits. Sarah, if residents knew about contamination and kept serving it, her expression could have frozen napalm. Federal environmental crime, criminal negligence with potential manslaughter charges if children suffered permanent damage. The EPA doesn't mess around with knowing contamination cover-ups. And that afternoon, attorney Marlene Vasquez reviewed lab results with the intensity of a pathologist examining murder evidence. This obliterates Sterling's entire position, she said, spreading contamination reports like tarot cards predicting doom. We're not fighting HOA harassment anymore. This is environmental crime with conspiracy charges and potential homicide implications. What's our battle plan? Immediate state health department notification and EPA involvement, emergency resident testing, instant well disconnection, criminal investigation of all responsible parties. She was already speed dialing federal contacts. Sterling's $30,000 bribe just became beautiful evidence of consciousness of guilt. The power balance had exploded and reformed completely. Sterling thought she was managing an annoying disability accommodation complaint. Reality? She'd been systematically poisoning neighbors for years while using HOA harassment to silence anyone who might investigate infrastructure irregularities. One final nail in her coffin, Vasquez said, reviewing Sterling's marketing materials. Her real estate business advertises Willowbrook as pristine environmental haven and perfect for health-conscious families. That's federal fraud with contamination knowledge. Walking out, I realized Sterling's reign of suburban terror was about to become a federal case study in environmental crime. The hunter had become the hunted. Monday morning, I assembled the kind of legal dream team that makes corrupt HOA presidents wake up in cold sweats. Attorney Vasquez brought in environmental law specialist Rebecca Cross, a former federal prosecutor who'd sent more environmental criminals to federal prison than most people send birthday cards. Cross had the kind of shark-eyed reputation that made EPA investigators genuflect and corporate defense lawyers develop sudden bladder problems. We're not just building a case, Cross announced during our war council, her conference room reeking of expensive coffee and impending doom for Sterling. We're constructing a federal prosecution that'll make environmental crime textbooks for the next 20 years. The irony was delicious. Sterling thought she was fighting a disabled guy over heated concrete. Reality? She was about to become the star defendant in a federal environmental conspiracy case. Step 1. Community health emergency protocols. Dr. Kim connected us with state health officials who specialized in contamination disasters. Within 48 hours, we'd have mobile hazmat testing units parked in Sterling's front yard, temporary city water connections for poisoned families, and pediatric specialists documenting contamination damage in children. You could almost smell Sterling's panic from 3 streets away. Step 2. Evidence gathering that would make CSI jealous. My old engineering buddy, Pete Rodriguez, ran a private infrastructure consulting firm specializing in underground utility forensics. Pete owed me favors from municipal projects where I'd saved his ass during budget hearings. You want me to map illegal pipe connections in an active suburban neighborhood? Pete's grin could power Christmas lights. Garrett, this sounds like the kind of fun that gets people federal prison sentences. Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Pete's ground-penetrating radar could trace every underground connection between agricultural wells and individual houses. We'd have detailed engineering schematics showing exactly who was connected to poison water, when illegal connections were installed, and how the entire criminal distribution system operated. Step 3. Financial forensics that would make Sterling wish she'd never heard of real estate. Rebecca Cross maintained contacts in federal financial crime units who specialized in following dirty money through shell companies and offshore accounts. If the Sterlings had profited beyond simple water bill savings, we'd find every criminal dollar. Real estate agents who knowingly market contaminated properties face federal fraud charges, Cross explained, cracking her knuckles like a pianist preparing for Carnegie Hall. If Sterling sold houses as environmentally pristine while knowing about poison wells, that's mail fraud, wire fraud, potentially RICO charges for ongoing criminal enterprise. The technical preparation felt like planning D-Day, if D-Day involved destroying suburban Karen dictators instead of Nazi beach fortifications. We scheduled routine environmental inspections during Thursday's HOA meeting for maximum public humiliation. State officials would arrive with hazmat teams and emergency shutdown orders, transforming Sterling's community presentation into a federal crime scene with witnesses. Meanwhile, I'd been documenting Sterling's retaliation campaign like a court reporter on amphetamines. Her private investigators, security guard harassment, and intimidation attempts created federal civil rights violations. Every threatening phone call, every attempt to silence potential witnesses added delicious years to her potential sentence. But the most beautiful element was Sterling's own evidence trail. Her frantic cover-up attempts had created documentation that read like signed confessions. The $30,000 bribe check, her panicked meeting adjournment when water bills were mentioned, Derek's recorded admissions about suspiciously low family utilities, all gorgeous evidence of consciousness of guilt. Tuesday evening, I coordinated with poisoned neighbors who now understood they'd been systematically contaminated while being harassed for asking inconvenient questions. Mrs. Bianca's eyes blazed with maternal fury, thinking about her grandchildren drinking toxic water. Mr. Kowalski connected his stomach problems to Sterling's criminal negligence. "That evil woman knew she was poisoning us," Mrs. Patterson whispered, voice shaking with controlled rage. "My baby grandson drank that water every weekend visit. She watched him play in our yard knowing it could damage his development." Community solidarity was building like steam pressure in an overheated engine. Neighbors who'd previously cowered before Sterling's HOA tyranny now realized they were federal crime victims. The legal fund had mushroomed to $50,000 through voluntary contributions, with new families joining as contamination awareness spread through neighborhood networks. Wednesday brought Pete's underground mapping results. Prosecutors' gold wrapped in engineering perfection. The distribution system showed sophisticated design with individual shutoff valves, bypass connections allowing seamless switching between contaminated and city water, and maintenance access points that had been actively serviced for years. "This wasn't amateur hour," Pete explained, reviewing radar data that looked like criminal blueprints. "Someone with professional municipal engineering knowledge designed this system. Too sophisticated for weekend DIY projects. That someone was obviously Baxter Sterling, abusing his city planning position to design illegal infrastructure while approving his own family's permits." Thursday morning delivered the final gift. Federal environmental investigators confirming criminal charges were imminent. Sterling would face EPA violations, conspiracy charges, federal fraud counts, and civil rights violations. Sterling had called an emergency HOA meeting for Thursday evening, probably planning to celebrate my voluntary walkway removal. Instead, she was walking into a federal ambush. Thursday afternoon brought Sterling's complete psychological breakdown in spectacular technicolor. Word had leaked through her city planning contacts that federal environmental investigators were circling Willowbrook like vultures over roadkill. Sterling's response was pure liquid panic mixed with expensive desperation and what smelled like stress-induced chain smoking. First, she tried ramming through an emergency HOA vote to ban all non-conforming residential modifications before evening's meeting. The proposal was so frantically broad it would have outlawed doorbells, garden hoses, and probably wheelchair ramps if she could slip it past legal review. I watched through the community center's grimy windows as she operated the copy machine with hands shaking like autumn leaves. The acrid smell of overheated toner mixed with her frantic cigarette smoke and what I'm pretty sure was straight vodka breath by 3 p.m. Then Derek appeared at my door looking like he'd rather face a firing squad than his aunt's latest instructions. "Mr. Finch, she wants me to do something about your electrical system." His voice cracked like a teenager asking for prom dates. "Says your walkway heating creates imminent fire hazards requiring emergency disconnection." "What kind of disconnection, Derek?" "She wants me to cut your power lines, tonight, before the meeting." He was practically hyperventilating. "Says it's preventive maintenance to protect community safety." Criminal sabotage. Sterling was ordering her own nephew to commit federal property destruction 12 hours before environmental crime investigators arrived. The desperation was so thick you could bottle it and sell it as anxiety medication. "Derek, that's felony destruction of property." "I know!" His voice pitched toward hysteria. "But she says if I don't do it, she'll fire me and tell my mom I've been embezzling HOA funds to buy drugs." Poor kid was trapped between committing federal crimes and family destruction. Sterling was willing to sacrifice her nephew's criminal record to buy herself 12 more hours of delusion. But Sterling's panic had reached beautiful new heights. Mrs. Bianca caught her offering board member Tom Wilson $7,000 cash to support emergency walkway prohibition. When Wilson refused, Sterling threatened to report his perfectly legal garden shed as unauthorized commercial structure, requiring immediate demolition. The woman was burning through her entire social network like a wildfire, consuming everything in sight. Around 4 p.m., Sterling made her most pathetically desperate gambit. She called my house directly, voice crackling with barely contained hysteria and what sounded suspiciously like day drinking. "Garrett, I can offer $75,000 for complete situation resolution." The number kept climbing like auction bids at a bankruptcy sale. "Mrs. Sterling, are you attempting to bribe a federal witness?" "I'm offering reasonable compensation for community harmony restoration." Words tumbled out like confession booth confessions. "Cash payment, immediate wire transfer, completely confidential transaction." What would this payment purchase exactly? Walkway removal, complaint withdrawal, signed non-disclosure agreement, and your family's voluntary relocation outside Willowbrook within 90 days. She wanted to pay me 75 grand to vanish before I could testify about her environmental conspiracy. The offer was so desperate it was almost comedic. "I'll need time to consider such a generous proposal," I replied, already planning how federal prosecutors would love adding attempted witness bribery to her expanding charge sheet. By 5 p.m., Sterling had achieved full manic breakdown status. Derek called warning me she'd hired emergency electricians to repair dangerous wiring problems in my heating system. The electricians turned out to be day laborers from Home Depot's parking lot, offered $500 cash to fix some electrical issues that might electrocute people. These guys knew as much about electrical systems as goldfish know about astrophysics. I documented everything with the methodical precision of a crime scene photographer. Bribery recordings, sabotage instructions, intimidation evidence, hiring unqualified workers for property destruction. Each desperate act was adding federal charges to her mushrooming legal catastrophe. The gorgeous irony was that Sterling's frantic cover-up attempts were manufacturing evidence faster than federal prosecutors could catalog it. Every panicked phone call, every escalating bribery offer, every intimidation threat was being recorded and preserved for criminal court presentation. At 6:30 p.m., Sterling arrived at the community center dressed like she was storming Normandy. Power suit that probably cost more than most cars, makeup applied with what appeared to be a paint roller, carrying herself like Napoleon marching toward Waterloo with a briefcase full of delusions. She had absolutely no idea that environmental crime investigators were positioned around the building like a SWAT team. Mobile contamination labs were primed to process evidence, and federal prosecutors were monitoring everything through encrypted communications networks. Derek shuffled behind her like a condemned prisoner approaching execution, knowing he was about to witness his aunt's complete destruction in front of the entire neighborhood. Sterling thought she was attending a routine HOA meeting where she'd finally crush the disabled troublemaker. Instead, she was walking into federal crime scene documentation that would make environmental law textbooks. Thursday evening arrived with the kind of electric tension that makes smart people lock their doors and stupid people walk into federal crime scenes. Sterling's final preparations looked like a deranged wedding planner organizing her own funeral. She'd hired additional security personnel to maintain order during community discussions. 3 oversized men in polyester suits who looked like they'd learned crowd control from WWE reruns. But her masterpiece of desperation was the Emergency Community Health Initiative she'd announced that afternoon. Sterling claimed she'd discovered potential contamination issues requiring immediate professional assessment of neighborhood infrastructure. The audacity was breathtaking. She was trying to spin her own criminal conspiracy as civic responsibility. "Mrs. Sterling is personally funding comprehensive testing to ensure residents' safety," read her hastily printed flyers, distributed by Derek, who looked like he was handing out suicide notes. "Community meeting tonight to discuss protective measures." She was attempting to control the contamination narrative before federal investigators could expose the truth, like an arsonist offering to investigate the fire they'd started. Meanwhile, her husband Baxter had reached peak corruption panic. Word through City Hall contacts suggested he'd been frantically shredding documents and deleting computer files since Tuesday. His planning committee colleagues were distancing themselves like he'd contracted political leprosy. Around 6 p.m., Sterling made her ultimate desperation play. She appeared at my door with a cashier's check and the kind of manic energy that precedes complete psychological breakdown. $100,000, Garrett. Her voice had the brittle quality of someone hanging on to sanity by dental floss. Complete resolution, signed agreements, no further questions. 100 grand. The woman was offering life-changing money to protect her poison conspiracy. That's quite an escalation from this morning's 75,000. The situation has become more complex. Her eyes darted around like trapped animals. Community harmony requires immediate, decisive action. Sterling's makeup was sliding off her face in the humidity, creating abstract patterns that looked like melting desperation. She reeked of stress sweat masquerading as expensive perfume, with undertones of what was definitely prescription anxiety medication. "Mrs. Sterling, are you feeling all right? You seem agitated." "I'm perfectly fine," she snapped, then immediately forced a smile that would terrify small children. "Just concerned about our wonderful community's future." But Sterling's lies were unraveling faster than a cheap sweater in a wood chipper. Derek had finally cracked under family pressure and called his mother about the escalating criminal instructions. His mom, Sterling's own sister, had immediately contacted a criminal defense attorney and was preparing to testify against Sterling to protect her son. Family loyalty has limits when federal prison sentences enter the conversation. By 7 p.m., Sterling's security team had positioned themselves around the community center like they were protecting state secrets instead of suburban crime scenes. The irony was magnificent. She'd hired muscle to intimidate witnesses at the exact moment federal investigators were documenting everything for criminal prosecution. But Sterling's paranoia had reached clinically fascinating levels. She'd convinced herself that I was part of some elaborate conspiracy involving city officials, environmental agencies, and possibly the deep state. Her worldview had collapsed into persecution fantasies that would make therapists rich. "You've been planning this from the beginning," she accused during our final pre-meeting confrontation. "Moving here, installing that walkway, filing complaints, this was all coordinated attack. Mrs. Sterling, I just wanted my wife to walk safely." "Don't lie to me." Spittle flew from her lips like toxic rain. "You and your government contacts have been targeting our family for months." The woman had lost complete touch with reality. In her mind, she wasn't a criminal conspirator facing federal charges. She was a victim of governmental persecution for successful suburban achievement. At 7:30 p.m., residents began arriving for what they thought was routine HOA business. Sterling greeted everyone with manic enthusiasm, pressing flyers about her voluntary community health initiative while her security goons loomed menacingly in the background. "Tonight we'll discuss exciting improvements to our infrastructure systems," she announced to confused neighbors. "Professional testing, upgraded facilities, enhanced community safety protocols." Mrs. Patterson exchanged worried glances with Mrs. Bianca. Mr. Kowalski looked like he was attending his own wake. Everyone could sense something catastrophic was building, but nobody understood Sterling was about to detonate her entire life in front of witnesses. The environmental crime investigators were positioned around the building like a documentary film crew preparing to capture historic footage. Mobile labs hummed quietly outside, ready to process contamination evidence. Federal prosecutors monitored communications, preparing to coordinate the largest HOA-related criminal case in state history. Sterling checked her watch obsessively, straightened her wilting power suit, and prepared to call the meeting that would end her freedom forever. She thought she was about to claim victory over the disabled troublemaker who'd threatened her perfect community. Instead, she was about to become the star defendant in a federal environmental conspiracy trial that would make legal textbooks for decades. The trap was set. Sterling was walking into it voluntarily. 7:45 p.m. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as 89 residents packed folding chairs, completely unaware they were about to witness the most spectacular HOA meltdown in federal crime history. Sterling stood at the podium like a dictator addressing her final rally, power suit wrinkled, makeup sliding, voice artificially cheerful in that way that makes sane people check exit locations. "Welcome, neighbors, to this important community enhancement meeting." Her security goons positioned themselves along the walls like discount Secret Service agents protecting suburban tyranny. The air reeked of cheap cologne, nervous perspiration, and impending legal catastrophe. "Tonight we address dangerous infrastructure modifications threatening our property values and community safety," Sterling announced, clicking to her first PowerPoint slide. The presentation was titled "Protecting Willowbrook's Future" in Comic Sans font that screamed amateur desperation. But Sterling had made one crucial oversight in her paranoid preparation. She'd been so focused on controlling the narrative that she'd missed the routine city inspection team quietly setting up equipment outside. Mobile environmental labs disguised as utility vehicles, federal investigators with badges hidden under windbreakers, state health officials preparing emergency shutdown protocols. Her nephew Derek sat in the back corner looking like he was attending his own execution, knowing federal agents had already interviewed him about his aunt's criminal conspiracy. Kid had flipped faster than a pancake on Sunday morning. As responsible community leaders, Sterling continued, advancing to slide 2 showing my heated walkway labeled infrastructure violation, we must prevent dangerous precedents that could bankrupt our HOA through lawsuits and insurance claims. Mrs. Patterson raised her hand from the third row. Veronica, what about the water testing results some residents have been discussing? Sterling's face flushed crimson. I have no knowledge of unauthorized water testing by outside agitators. But you mentioned community health initiatives in your flyers, Mrs. Bianca pressed. Are there health concerns we should know about? The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Sterling knew she was walking into quicksand but couldn't stop moving forward. Some residents have been spreading unfounded rumors about our excellent water quality, she said, voice rising toward hysteria. Tonight we're addressing these false allegations once and for all. That's when I stood up with my laptop and evidence folder, feeling like a prosecutor approaching closing arguments. Actually, Mrs. Sterling, let's discuss those water quality results. Sterling's eyes went wide as dinner plates. Mr. Finch, you're out of order. I have state environmental lab results showing dangerous contamination levels in neighborhood water supplies. I opened my laptop, projecting test results onto the community center's screen. Nitrate levels 300% above safe consumption standards. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Sterling lunged for the podium microphone like she was grabbing a life preserver. Those tests were conducted illegally without HOA authorization. By state-certified laboratories using EPA protocols, I continued calmly. The contamination appears to originate from illegal agricultural well connections serving multiple residences. Sterling's security guard started moving toward me, but stopped dead when Dr. Sarah Kim stood up from the back row, producing her state environmental agency credentials. I'm Dr. Kim, State Environmental Contamination Specialist. We have documented evidence of systematic water contamination endangering public health. Now Sterling's panic went full meltdown. This is a setup. These people are conspiring against our community. That's when the community center doors opened and federal environmental crime investigators walked in, badges visible, recording equipment rolling. Mrs. Sterling, said the lead investigator, a woman who looked like she'd prosecuted environmental criminals for breakfast. We need to discuss some irregularities in your neighborhood's water infrastructure. Sterling's face cycled through denial, rage, and pure terror in about 3 seconds. The room had gone morgue silent except for the humming of recording equipment and Sterling's increasingly labored breathing. I don't know anything about water problems, she stammered, mascara starting to run. We practice water conservation in our family. Ma'am, we have documented evidence of illegal well connections, federal water safety violations, and conspiracy to conceal environmental crimes, the investigator continued. We also have recordings of attempted bribery and witness intimidation. Derek raised his hand from the back like a student confessing to cheating. She offered Mr. Finch $100,000 this evening to keep quiet about the contamination. Sterling's world imploded in real time. Her security guards were backing toward exits. Neighbors were staring at her like she'd confessed to mass murder. Federal investigators were documenting everything for criminal prosecution. This meeting is over, she shrieked, attempting to flee the podium. Actually, Mrs. Sterling, the federal investigator said, producing handcuffs that glinted under fluorescent lights, this investigation is just beginning. The community center erupted in chaos as Sterling was read her rights in front of 89 witnesses, news cameras, and federal law enforcement. Justice had arrived with badges and criminal indictments. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my kitchen watching snow melt perfectly on our heated walkway while Rosalind waters plants that are thriving in clean, city-supplied water. The immediate aftermath was beautiful chaos. Sterling and Baxter both received federal indictments on 14 counts, including environmental conspiracy, federal fraud, civil rights violations, and attempted witness tampering. Sterling's looking at 7 to 12 years in federal prison. Baxter got 15 years for corruption and abuse of public office. Derek testified against his aunt in exchange for immunity, then used his settlement money to enroll in environmental engineering courses. Kid wants to spend his career cleaning up the messes that people like his aunt create. The environmental cleanup took 4 months and cost $1.3 million in federal funds. Sterling's assets were seized to cover remediation costs, victim compensation, and legal fees. Her real estate business collapsed when clients discovered she'd been marketing contaminated properties as environmentally pristine family communities. Every affected family received emergency medical screening and ongoing health monitoring. Mrs. Patterson's grandchild recovered completely after switching to clean water and specialized medical treatment. Mr. Kowalski's stomach problems disappeared within weeks of well disconnection. Mrs. Bianca's family showed no lasting health effects thanks to early detection. The community transformation was remarkable. Our new HOA board focuses on actual community service instead of petty tyranny. Monthly environmental testing ensures water safety. We established disability accommodation policies that became a model for other planned communities. My heated walkway, officially designated as essential medical infrastructure with full HOA approval and community support. Rosalind can now access her oxygen deliveries safely year-round, and she's been helping other residents understand disability accommodation rights. But the real victory was community solidarity. Neighbors who'd previously feared Sterling's retaliation became close friends through shared adversity. The Kowalski family hosts monthly barbecues where everyone brings contamination-free water and celebrates survival. Mrs. Bianca started a neighborhood watch program that actually watches out for each other instead of reporting code violations. We established the Clean Water Community Scholarship using Sterling's seized assets. Local students studying environmental engineering or public health receive funding to prevent future contamination disasters. The scholarship has already supported 12 students, including Derek Sterling, who's become one of our strongest advocates for infrastructure transparency. The legal precedent was significant. Federal prosecutors now use the Willowbrook case to train investigators on suburban environmental crimes. Our community became a model for identifying HOA corruption and protecting vulnerable residents from systematic targeting. Sterling's former colleagues in real estate and city planning faced their own investigations. 3 additional officials were indicted for permit corruption. The City Planning Committee was completely restructured with new oversight protocols and conflict of interest rules. Personal healing took longer than legal resolution. Rosalind and I grew closer through the crisis, our marriage strengthened by facing adversity together. She started a support group for environmental contamination victims that now serves 6 counties. Her breathing has improved significantly with clean air, reduced stress, and the knowledge that she's helping other families avoid similar poisoning. The annual Clean Water Festival commemorates our victory each spring. Local environmental groups set up information booths, children learn about water safety, and we celebrate community resilience. Sterling's former house was converted into a community environmental monitoring center because irony tastes better than revenge. My consulting work expanded into helping other communities identify environmental hazards and HOA corruption. The engineering skills I used to expose Sterling's conspiracy now protect families across 3 states. It's the most satisfying work of my career, using technical knowledge to fight bullies who target vulnerable people. Rosalind laughs when people ask if we regret moving to Willowbrook. "This is home," she says. "Bad people don't define good places. Good people fighting back do." She's right. Sterling's reign of terror lasted 6 years, but our community's recovery will last generations. The most beautiful justice? Sterling's cell has no heated floors, contaminated water, and roommates who don't appreciate environmental criminals. Meanwhile, our neighborhood thrives with clean water, disability accommodations, and neighbors who actually care about each other's well-being. Some fights are worth everything. Some victories protect more than just yourself.